Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the album Hago by the band Hago.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So before everything, I have to tell you that this is probably the longest script I've ever written for an album, and that tells you a lot. So this is gonna be a very long video, so if you're gonna like it, you can, subscribe or like or comment or do anything, because I put a lot of effort into these. I don't just go ahead, listen to an album and start spewing my words about it. I actually, write everything down on paper, then transfer some of the things onto the computer, write a script, then, read it off from here, and I make these videos for you, and I do this all daily. So if you like what you see, you might want to stay tuned for more.
What we're thinking of as aliens are there.
So as I said, this is Hago by Hago. Now it was released back in 2018 and it is comprised of Israeli players, but this band was actually not formed in Israel, but rather in Berkeley University in the United States. Now, besides having the band members of Hago, this album consists of so many more players on here, like so many more. I can't even count the number of players and the instruments that are on this album because there's so many of them. But what is sure is that they make excellent use of every single one playing on here. Like, the ensemble is fantastic. You have some instruments which you wouldn't find anywhere else, and they're all used simultaneously in such unique ways, and this album is so special. And this album did like the odd thing that happens once in a while, where an album starts off, good, that later explodes into something that is great, even somewhat, perfect, and that's amazing when it happens. So the first track on here, it really got into the entire mood of things. It featured some riffs which really felt to me like they came off of a King Crimson album, but I didn't really like their use of synthetic drums. I think it was kind of off-putting. But when the second track of Ezekiel 1:4 came up, I suddenly realized that I was dealing with something that I did not expect, something far greater than what I was anticipating to listen to. Now, by the way, this passage specifically refers to the one where a godly figure / angel exposes itself to Ezekiel the prophet, and I remember this story. It's actually a pretty interesting story, and all these stories around Ezekiel are pretty wild because he was one of the most badass characters in the Bible. Yeah, I'm a nerd for saying it, but he was pretty badass. Now, although this album is actually categorized as progressive metal, I found this to be way off the truth, like about this entire album, and Ezekiel 1:4 made me realize this, because to me at least this was maybe soft metal, but more like hard symphonic prog mixed with jazz fusion, a mixture which I believe to be one of the best that exist. Now, listening to Ezekiel, I thought that I had some similarities to the sound, but I didn't know to which band it sounded similar to. But when the next track of 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮 came up, I realized that the certain parts on here really do sound like camel. So this song 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮 actually has more meaning into it, and I can elaborate more because I kinda understand this world as an Israeli myself. So this song basically features an oxymoron, being that gefilte refers to the dish of gefilte fish, which originates from Europe, while kebab is a dish that originates from the Middle East. Now, if you don't know, a lot of Israeli people come from both these regions, and they all come to this one place where everything mixes up. Now, this song does a great representation of just that idea, because it has a lot of, let's say, Arabian/Middle Eastern songs, and not songs, but compositional elements, which are played by mostly Ashkenazi/European instruments, mainly being the clarinet. And I think that the sort of etymology and everything that went into this song really made it perfect, and I gave it a 10 out of 10 rating, thinking that nothing could top it. But then the track Ancient Secrets came along, and I was dumbstruck. I did not know what to do with myself because it was more perfect than the perfection that was 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮. So I did something which is unconforming to everything that I've ever done, and gave this particular song a rating of 11 out of 10. Am I right for doing this? Is it justified? I don't know. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. I've never really set any rules, but this song was so good that I just felt the urge to give it an 11 out of 10. And you better be sure that I listened to that track many, many more times since listening to this album for the first time yesterday. And while I must admit that it does start in a bit of a slow manner, I learned to appreciate it quite quickly, and then it gets to this fretless bass solo in the middle, and I was just hooked on it for the rest of probably my life because it's so good. But bizarrely, despite this being a fantastic song, I actually don't have a lot to say about it, so I would suggest my best advice for you would be to give it a listen, because I think it's really a fantastic song that most people should know. And moving on, we have the song Rain, which is really, short, and it's interesting because it does give off that sense of raininess. And then we have the song 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮. Now, that song is based on a Hebrew song written back in 1927, and it's basically a cover of that song. And this track is the first and last one to feature any lyrics on it, and they're in Hebrew. Now, even as a Hebrew speaker myself, I could not really understand it because it was really odd in the way that it was sung, and it's really old Hebrew, so there's a lot to it. But I like the idea of it, and it talks about the farmer being connected to his land, and it's a really cool song to really fit with the entire vibe of this album. And afterwards we get some songs which are pretty great, and they're written fantastically with composition, but they're not as good as the ones that came before it. So you have songs like Aurora or Anti-Kaithira, I think it's called, and you also have Alpha Centauri, but then we get to the last track of Traformador. And whether you have or have not read Slaughterhouse 5, this track is still pretty confusing. So I will help you a bit in understanding this one. So Traformador is actually a reference to a made-up planet by 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮 in his book Slaughterhouse 5. Now that planet has aliens which are basically unstuck in time, and it's the entire idea of the story, and you should really go ahead and read it because it's a fantastic book from start to finish. Now, I actually found an Easter egg on that song, and I don't know if that's the way you'd call it, but I think it is. So the song itself has this midsection where there's a person speaking about being an Area 51 worker, and then he escapes and he says a bunch of things about aliens and them being extra dimensional entities, and it sounds really stressed out. Now, for you most astute viewers, you'd actually realize that this is a sample taken off of another album we've listened to on here, and it's from the song 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮 by the band Tool in their album Lateralis. Now, that's actually Maynard James Keenan, the lead vocalist for Tool, actually performing, or I might even say saying, a voice call that was made to the radio station of Coast by Coast AM back in September 11th, 1997. No, not that September 11th. And that specific call was made very infamous in the conspiracy theory world because it basically features a man which sounds really panicked and saying that he worked in Area 51 and that the aliens are not what we think they are, and it's all sorts of creepy, and you can go ahead and listen to it online. So basically Keenan from Tool sang it or performed it, and then Hago used it as a sample. So yeah, this probably doesn't, impress any of you, but I thought it was pretty impressive that I could note out and see that those two were basically the same thing. And besides that, this last track has great usage of a Greek lyre. Now, if you don't know what a lyre, it basically is like the forefather of the harp, and it's a really unique instrument, and they have this entire solo dedicated to it on here, and I think it's so good, so unique. The sound is nothing like you can actually get with synthesized sounds, and I loved it very much. Now, another cool thing about this last track, you basically have at the end a start of a guitar solo, which if you listen closely, it ends where the album begins, basically making this a loop album, much like other albums such as The Wall by Pink Floyd. So this album is great. They thought about everything fits, it goes right, they always know what to do next, and it feels so cohesive, and I was really ashamed to see that this was their only album to date, and I really do hope that they release more albums, or at least more tracks and singles, because they are so good. So when it comes to this cover, I think it's pretty good, and I think it reflects this album very well. One thing I do have to say for it is that I would have loved if they used actual props to, make this and not Photoshop, because I don't know, it just has this more authentic vibe. I think what Magma does with their covers, the way that they make them feel really, true, is because they use props, much like we've seen in the album K.A. But I do think that the vibe and the entire, aspects of this album really resonate within this cover, and that's always what you want to have when you're making an album cover. And it's also pretty convenient that your album name is also the same as your band name, because you can then conserve space and just write your name as Hago did and wrote their name. So this album will receive a 9 out of 10. It's not a perfect album, but honestly, I can totally see them creating a perfect album if they just make one more and, learn from some of their not really mistakes, but like mishaps on this album. And I think they could make really fantastic music that you would all like to listen to. Now, I would say not a lot of people know about this album, and this might be the first actual review done about it on YouTube. So if you're seeing this, please go ahead, check out this album. It is so good. I didn't just give it a 9 out of 10, it really deserved it, and I wasn't expecting it to be that good, so it tells you a lot. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to Wolf City by 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮. Now, for some reason, when a lot of people talk about this band, they actually just call them 𝓷𝓲𝓬𝓮, so I don't know, maybe that's their name, who knows. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video and have a wonderful day. I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.